not live.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Rob, along with the esteemed Coach Ed Warner. Coach, welcome. And we got a show to get into. We got a lot of information to get out there, but some big news first, right?
Oh, yeah. Some big news for me and my family. I accepted the offensive quarterback job of the Rhine Fire. That's a team over in Europe in the ELF European League Football, an offshoot of the NFL Europe that used to be over there. A lot of those teams are together. A 16-team league. You play through August. Playoffs are in August. The team I'm joining has won the ELF Super Bowl the last 2 seasons, the Rhine Fire out of Dusseldorf, Germany. So I'm headed over there in a week. So I'll be doing my part of the podcast from Germany or some other country, depending on where we play.
Well, I think that's an exciting opportunity for you and Mary Beth as well. Certainly wish you the best, and I look forward to learning a lot about the European Football League and hopefully getting some inside information from you on it.
Thank you. Yeah, we're real excited. Mary Beth and I are excited, and I'll head over there next week, and she'll come in May, and we'll spend the summer in Europe and play a 12-game schedule and then see how we do in the playoffs.
Awesome. I think I'll have to join you for one of those podcasts on location somewhere.
There you go. Come on.
So if you guys haven't been living under a rock, you know what time of year it is. It's March Madness. We are very, very fortunate to have one of the top bracketologists in the country, if not the world. Rob Cirillo, nice to see you. How are you today?
Doing well. Glad to be here, fellas. Appreciate the invite to the show. It's approaching really the best sports time of the year, in my opinion. You know, we've got, like you say, Rob, March Madness, 2 full days of that starting tomorrow. Tips, I think, at 12:15. You know, that TV doesn't turn off in my house until 12 o'clock, 11:59, I should say, p.m. And, you know, after that, obviously, we're looking at Masters coverage and, you know, we've got MLB opening day and even the Kentucky Derby. So I can't wait for tomorrow to, you know, start that run.
Amen. Amen. Well, you know, we've got a limited amount of time, and I know you're quite busy at this time of the year. So if we could just jump right in it. Auburn, the first game. Is there any doubt that this team could lose to a 16 seed?
Rob, I think we've seen our 2 16-1 upsets of my lifetime already. You know, in 2023, when Fairleigh Dickinson knocked off Purdue, and then UMBC beating Virginia years back. So, you know, Alabama State, I got to hand it to them, though. Last night's game was heroic. You know, for anybody that didn't see it, you know, you have that inbound play guy, right? He's just part of the team always. And he was utilized with about 3.5 seconds to go last night in a tie game, threw a Hail Mary pass, 3/4 of the court, you know, tipped around a little bit. And sure enough, Alabama State beat St. Francis at the buzzer. So I think they've used up their magic, you know, certainly like Auburn in that one, even though they, you know, had a bit of a skid at the end of the season. I think they closed out 4-3 in the regular season, but I think they'll hit their stride again, you know, come tourney time.
Awesome.
Well, that was an exciting way to start the tournament play in. So how about here in the Lexington bracket, Louisville versus Creighton?
You know, I think that's going to be one of the better games of the tournament, fellas. You know, you're looking at a Louisville team that a lot of folks felt were underseeded. You know, I'll say this. I was probably on the outside of that. You know, when you do bracketology, you have to look at it from a couple senses too, right? It's all a numbers-oriented process. But over the last 6 years, the committee has gone to the net rankings from RPI. Louisville came in with a net of 28, I believe, if memory serves me right. And didn't have many tests in quad one games. They were 4-6. So, it's easy to make the case if you look at them being number 2 in the ACC. But if you take every which, analysis, there's always a story for something, right? So I think that the committee actually did a fine job at, placing Louisville as a 7 seed there. I do like them to beat Creighton in that, or as an 8 seed. I do like them to beat Creighton in that 8-9 matchup. Although I will say Creighton has a, very talented, guard and big man duo in Ryan Kalkbrenner and Ashworth. And, they made a deep run in the Big East tournament. I have a hard time riding those teams late into the NCAA tournament just because it's a little bit more wear on them, right? If you're playing 3 or 4 games in your conference tournament. So I tend to, favor, teams that don't have that wear and tear. And I just think overall, it's been a phenomenal season for Louisville. And I like them to get past Creighton in about a 2-possession game, I'd say, that comes down the wire late.
Awesome. Well, I think your comments play well into this next game. If you can't tell by the big block M behind me, Michigan, UC San Diego. And before we get to this game, even if I put my bias aside, I look at the seeding of Michigan as a 5 with some questions. I don't know where you stand on that.
I'm glad you brought that up, Rob. And same here. I'll tell you this, and we even heard from the committee after the teams were announced as far as, what they did with UNC, right? Essentially, the point was made that if UAB would have beat Memphis, UNC was the team to fall out, and that determination, I believe, was done on Saturday night. So where I go with that is it just makes me feel, it's been said before, that unfortunately the Big Ten championship game, given the time that it falls, doesn't have as much impact on the ultimate seeding as it should. Potentially it's too late to make too many changes. But I had Michigan as a 4 seed myself. I thought they were very deserving of that, 3 being a bit of a stretch because their net ranking was right around 26 or 7 going into that game.
Right. And you look at Wisconsin's a 3 seed. Michigan was 2-0 against them this year. They have more quad 1 wins than all but 2 or 3 teams in the tournament.
To your point, I was one of the few bracketologists this year that considered that win from Michigan to kind of equate and offset, the 2-0 record that you speak to, put them on the same seed line as Wisconsin as a 4, and actually had Maryland as the 3. I thought there was a case to be made that they should have been the 3. And you'll see that's where I go with my bracket as far as I'm strong in the Big Ten this year. And, Maryland is one of my teams that I have making a long run.
Awesome. So where do you see in this game?
You might cut me off of the program right now, guys. But, it's a 12-5, right? I mean, that is the every year storyline. And I try to stay away from it as much as possible. But, I do like UC San Diego. They've got a story in themselves. This is a team that's first year in Division I. And ironically, their women's squad in their first year also made the dance. So they have some 3-point shooting specialists. If they can hit the 3 ball at a 35% plus clip, I think they find themselves winning this ball game. It's a big if. I will say that they'll have trouble, all game with the 2 7-footers from Michigan, assuming that they don't get into foul trouble, right? But I think, this is going to be one of those games that will be a heavy upset pick as well.
3 7-footers if you add Cheddar in there as well. Although
True story.
He's not your typical.
Well, staying out there in Denver in those brackets, how about Texas A&M, a 4 seed against Yale, a 13 seed?
Yeah, Yale's been a mainstay the last couple of years. That league in the Ivy, they switched from the regular season champ getting an automatic bid to playing, a tournament to secure it. And it's been Yale and Princeton since they incorporated that setup. So, while they have that, recent tournament history, I think Texas A&M is going to be too much to handle. A key stat on those guys, they've got they lead the nation in offensive rebounding. So a lot of second half points in that game. And, I can see that rebounding margin being about 12 to 14 when it's said and done. And I don't think it'll be especially close as far as that goes. I see, Texas A&M potentially pulling away by double digits.
And sticking with the SEC here, the Ole Miss matchup.
Isn't that story hard to believe? The former record for teams from the same conference was 11 in the Big East. 14, all but 2 made it from the SEC. And, the committee, I think, had a hard time too, because when you place these teams, something you have to keep into account is historically they have set it up to where they don't have the potential to play each other until the Sweet 16. But how do you mathematically do that given the scenario that was, right? I'll say this about Ole Miss. I do think they are a unique story in the SEC, not the physical squad that you're used to. One of the more undersized teams actually in the whole tournament at that, which is incredibly odd being that, we're looking at SEC recruits. So I would say that North Carolina, while they were a team that got a lot of grief, and this has nothing to do with me being on the ground in Charlotte, North Carolina. I actually grew up in Illinois, so I've got Big Ten roots myself. But they looked great last night. And if you look at the overall body of work that they did throughout the year, their net was, in the low 30s. I think where a lot of people had trouble, and generally the committee has really looked at the records against Quad 1 teams. And UNC was 1-12. So that, didn't really come into play this year at all, in which it has in the past. And so that was the case to be made as far as why UNC didn't belong. But at the same time, of the bubble teams, they had as good of a net ranking as any. And I do like UNC to win this game. I think we see year after year, fellas, a situation in which a play-in 11 seed makes that run to the Sweet 16 and beyond. And for me, that's UNC this year.
Well, I'm over in Lake Lure, so I'm right down the street from you. But, about a month or so ago, we had Jones Angel on from North Carolina.
Nice.
And, we asked him, I don't know, I can't remember, Ed, whether it was you or I, but, at the time UNC was reeling and we certainly, Ed and I, felt that UNC had a chance to rebound their season, and that's certainly what they did.
Some of the most underrated golf that you'll play out there in Lake Lure. I've had that experience a few times.
Awesome. Well, when you come out again, we'll take you out over to Rumbling Bald or Apple Valley. They're awesome.
I'll hold y'all to it. Sounds fun. In that next matchup, with Iowa State and Lipscomb. I think, Lipscomb hasn't had too many tournament appearances, usually on that 14, 15, even the 13 line. You see, repeat teams from some of the, smaller mid-majors. So they don't have that history necessarily. Iowa State has been injury battled throughout the year. They are getting a few guys back come tournament time. I think it'll be a closer game than expected, but Iowa State, I see running away with it late.
Yep, I see that.
The moving on down the bracket
Yep.
in that New Mexico Marquette game, the 3-pointer is the great equalizer, right?
Yep.
And Marquette, I feel, has to lead or be within a couple possessions from the get-go. They actually shoot at as high of a clip as any team in America inside the arc, around 56%. But, if they're playing 3 possessions down, it's going to be an uphill battle for them. So, New Mexico.
They really haven't been tested
actually,
either too much
really?
this year, have they?
Say it again.
Lipscomb hasn't really been tested too much this year, have they?
Have not. No. Yeah, but in that one, I like the Iowa State win. But yeah, in the Marquette, New Mexico game, New Mexico has 6 top 50 Ken Pom wins, which is really impressive for being in the scheduling setup that they have conference wise. So you can see them as a high mid major in this battle, and I'm taking the 10 seed Aggies in that one.
I got you.
Michigan State.
How about the next one, then you've got Tom Izzo and Michigan State, a 2 seed coming out as Big Ten champs regular season against Bryant.
What is it? How does it go? I'll ask you guys. It's January, February, Izzo, April, May. I know that's tough for you to accept, but that's just the reality here. I think that's one of the hottest teams in the nation. And to your point, Michigan State, and I think they make a deep run in the tournament as well. In fact, they're one of my Final Four picks. I think they eventually knock off Auburn. Bryant is rare for a low mid major, as I'll refer to them as. They're actually a taller team, so they can hang with some Big Ten squads, but they'll be overmatched, I think, ultimately in this one. And like I said, I think Michigan State is playing their best ball at the right time. That used to even be a metric, how you did in the last 10 games when the RPI was in. And, I think there was a reason for it too, right? That's a true testament to where you are today. And so I think Michigan State makes a deep run in the tournament.
Well, before we move on to Florida, you raised a good point, which I was waiting to ask you about, the metrics. Tell us a little bit about what metrics you specifically take a look at or have found to be persuasive in how you put your brackets together.
Absolutely. I will say that the net is truly the standard these days for ranking. There's gonna be offsets to it. And with that said and done, you're looking at, I'll give you the best example. Gonzaga, number 8 in the net, an 8 seed. Generally, you'll see that more so with a team on the mid-major level that hasn't made a tournament before. That maybe that first year they'll say, you got to earn that respect, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, guys, Gonzaga's as far from needing to do that as anybody, right?
Right there.
And so I think quad 1 wins, like I was saying earlier, has a significant impact. But I think it's more from an outlier stance than anything else. Right. So it's quad 1 and then quad 4. Those are going to make or break you. That quad 2 and quad 3 gets real technical when you start deciphering those. And it's just hard to stand out. Even if you're, call it 11-1 in quad 2 games or 12-0 in quad 3 games, the records across the board for these tournament teams is going to be 800% winning ball and beyond. Right.
Right.
So it's really those 2 metrics predominantly. Ken Pom, is a great, site for it. He's got some different analytics, like even a luck variable involved. And so when you really want to dive into the, deep analysis of it, Memphis, for instance, is a great example of Ken Pom. Very few people had them as high as a 5 seed. They were, I think, 50 to 52 in the net rankings. And, so a lot of, 8, 9, even 10 lines for Memphis. But, in the Ken Pom, they're right there in that like top 10 to 12. So you always have to, take a look over there as well.
So this next matchup, Florida, Norfolk State.
Right down there in Raleigh near you.
That's right. That's a Norfolk State team that's won a big game against Missouri as a 15 seed before. I think Florida, though, is one of the more balanced teams in America as far as offensive and defensive efficiency. They also have 4 double-digit scorers. So, if 1 or 2 guys are off, they can find their offense, right? And that's just going to be a giant hill, too large to climb for Norfolk State.
So with Florida, for example, if you look at their quad 1 wins, I'm not sure they have any outside of the SEC. I'm not even sure they had any matchups against a quad one team outside of the SEC. So, and I'll tie this back to what you said with the SEC earlier. Is the SEC that good, or were they just taking advantage, just playing each other and the benefit of some good early season wins?
Rob, it's a great point. And I think it needs to be discussed at length, right? I mean, you're looking at a team in Texas, for instance, and, based upon the numbers, I had Texas in the tourney, but they're 6-12 in SEC play. But when you get, 18 opportunities against quad one schools, you're going to have the wins. And unfortunately, an aspect that I think that went away, from the seating committee, because RPI was a ratings percentage index. So it took, a team, let's call it, that was 5-2 and gave them a better overall rating, arguably, than a squad that was 8-7, you see, because of the percentages in play. It's not about how many, it's about how you actually fared. So what I would like to see the committee do is kind of get back to that, happy medium, right? And I think a great example, hypothetically, of that is, let's say a team like Drake, had they lost to Bradley in the Missouri Valley Conference tournament. That's a Drake team that was 2-0 in quad one games. Didn't have tests outside of, their conference play besides early season. They were like 52-53 in, the net rankings. I don't think they would have made the tournament had they lost to Bradley, a 27-4 team. And I just don't see how much more they could do, keeping in mind that the ratings for the Missouri Valley Conference, it's a top 10 league, overall. So that's kind of the catch-22. I think one of the major reasons for bringing in the net rankings to begin with was so that more mid-majors would have a healthy chance to make the NCAA tournament, but it's not necessarily what we've seen, and right. I'll give you an example of that. I think Boise State was a team that did all they could. But, when you're making the bracket, you got to think like the committee as well, right? And I just didn't see the committee putting 5 teams from their conference in the tournament, right? And so that's just kind of some of the variables in play here.
Yep.
Hey, so this next game, I'm intrigued because Bobby Hurley and UConn, how can they make a run? Can he get them going? I mean, back-to-back champs. Can he get a run and go deep in this tournament or not?
Sorry about the dogs in the background, guys.
That's okay.
So I'll tell you this. Three-peat or not, I don't think that happens. Right?
I don't either, but.
Yeah. Interesting year for those guys.
Yes.
Brutal start to the season. You were hearing why didn't Hurley take the LA coaching job? You gotta really respect somebody on another level, though, right? When they kind of see through from a program vantage point like Hurley did. I think that UConn wins that game. Tournament experience does mean a lot. They have, made deep runs back-to-back years as champs. So, they're going to, in the clutch elements of a game, be as ready as any team. Oklahoma, if you want to really break it down, they finished near the bottom of their conference and they still made the tournament. I mean, it hurts to be in the SEC, but
only from the loss standpoint, not from making the tournament this year.
Exactly.
But I mean, earlier in the season, it looked like you had UConn, Kansas, and UNC. If you would have ended the season, say in February, probably none of those 3 teams would have made it, which would have been
You're exactly right. They all had work to do at that point in the year, and to your point, Kansas, the preseason number 1 at that.
Right.
So how much in your analysis you look at UConn coming on strong in the last 6 weeks of the season? How much does that, you have the rankings, you looked at all the stuff. How much do you move a team based on, say, the last 6 weeks of the season?
Not as much as I would have when I started doing bracketology, and that all goes back to kind of how the last 10 fell into place, as I was saying a bit before, where there was more value back in like the 2017, 2016, in earlier times of those last 10 compared to now. It's really that body of work and some, adjusted efficiency numbers and all that go into it. So maybe one seed line to answer your question, as far as, and that's only if I've got them in my, 1 to 68 to where they're on the fringe, right? How do I push like let's put a number on it for an 11 seed, that 45th team overall ranked by myself to a 44, then that might be where it goes, right? To move up a seed line, but I'm not going to take the last 10 seed and jump them to a 9 seed.
Gotcha.
Just a spot or two, even at that.
So when it comes to picking teams, like say a matchup, and you got two teams that might be evenly matched, what comes into play there? Are you looking at how they played recently? What are some of the factors you consider on picking a specific game as opposed to where they're seated?
Tempo is key for that. Matchups are essential. How they did finish the season does have an impact on that. Those teams that make the deep tournament runs, as I was suggesting earlier, 2 to 3 extra games in a 35 game season does make a difference, right? Especially for making deep runs in a tournament when your turnaround time is 2 days from one matchup to another. So
yep,
it's kind of a healthy mix of all that.
Well, I think we know where the next 2 games are going to go, but Memphis, Colorado State.
Yep, Colorado State did surge at the end of the season. That's another 12 that I like. Moving on, and we all know the Memphis story, but Penny Hardaway has turned that program around. They had a phenomenal season. They also have a potential injury in their first teamer Hunter. I know he was in a boot during the conference finals, so hope that he's on the court, but I think it's a stretch to expect him to be.
Gotcha.
In that next game, as I was saying, Maryland's one of those Elite 8 teams in my bracket. So I think, Grand Canyon State is definitely a team that we all know about, right? As fans, they have made runs in the past. It's not quite the same Grand Canyon team, I think, as last year, but I think it'll be a good game. I think you're probably looking at a halftime that's fairly close. Give it, 6-7 minutes in the second half, and 12-2 type Maryland run, and they pull away with it from there.
Gotcha.
I love this next matchup with
the Missouri Drake. That's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah. For those that don't know, Missouri was coming off of a 19 straight loss season in SEC play last year. That roster is essentially all transfer portal guys in the starting mesh. And so with that said and done, you're looking at a team that is rightfully clicking too, chemistry wise, a little bit later in the season. That's naturally going to happen when these guys haven't played together and they've been one or two scoring options at their other schools, right? But then there's Drake. That's one of the few 30-win teams in the tournament. Ben McCollum's done a fantastic job in his first year there. They've become a mainstay in the tournament, I think the last 3 or 4 years. But I do like Missouri. I think they play at a fast pace. I think they'll get up and down the floor. Drake won't be able to slow them down quite enough. But this is one of those games that I could see going to overtime as well. And, being one of those that you're not getting off your couch for any minute.
Then
Drake won 30 games. No matter what you say, winning 30 games
it's a feat in itself. Yeah.
Tech and UNCW.
Yeah. My wife will kill me here because she's a UNCW grad. And I'll preface it after by saying that Texas Tech, I think, is one of the more underseeded teams in the tournament as well. That's a squad that was 13-5 in quad one games. With a net score, a ranking of, I think, 10 to 11. So there were, a lot of considerations for them being on a 2-line for myself. I couldn't quite do it. But, they've also in the last 6 years made the Final Four. And, I have them getting very close this year with an Elite Eight out to that Maryland Terrapins team.
Well, how about moving on then? Kansas, Arkansas.
Can you guys remember the last time we've seen Kansas as a 7 seed in the tournament?
No, and they've been Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde all year. I mean, they've just been up and down and lacked consistency. I follow Kansas. I coached there 5 years, and I know Bill real well. But and then, of course, he's playing John Calipari, who started his coaching career at KU. I mean,
this is storyline matchups, I would say, of the bracket. We take that a step further even and think about the scenario, which I believe does happen, in which you've got Arkansas facing St. John's in a round of 32 game. And you're looking at Pitino Calipari. I just wish they would have put that one in Lexington.
Yeah.
That would have been something.
Yeah.
Yes.
So who do you like in that game?
Gosh, in that St. John's Arkansas game, I like St. John's, but I will say this: Arkansas has had a lot of success in the tournament over the last 5 to 7 years, and St. John's by the numbers isn't necessarily a sexy team. I think they shoot the 3 ball at about a 29% clip, so they've got to have a lot of things go right. Which is why I don't think they ultimately make a run beyond the Sweet 16.
And they haven't had the schedule, and they haven't played the tough teams game in and game out like Arkansas has.
No, that's right. It was a down year for the Big East compared to, where it's been. You could make the case that, prior to this season, encompassing the last 5 years, the Big East was as good of a conference strength-wise as any.
Yes.
But, that fell off a little bit this year. So you're seeing a bunch of 7 through 9 seeds from the Big East, besides St. John's otherwise. So I think that, ultimately you're looking at that bracket being as competitive as any. I think UConn will even give that Maryland team quite a bit of a test. But, a lot of that just boils down to have been there, done that. They're not going to fall out of the tournament easy, being a team that's looking to three-peat, right?
Right.
So you have UConn taking Florida out?
I have UConn taking Florida out. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, my former friends down in Florida won't like to hear that. And and you have Maryland Tech?
Maryland Tech as the Sweet 16 matchup over there.
And
or
coming
the,
out?
Elite Eight matchup, excuse me.
And coming out of there?
Yep. And coming out of there, I've got Maryland against Michigan State in a all Big Ten, that side of the bracket, Final Four.
I like it. Now we move over to the other side, Duke. I mean, do we just write them all the way down the line? How far do we go with this team?
I mean, they are right up there with Auburn as the betting favorite, right? Flag is good to go. No reason to think that he's not going to enhance everybody on that team, right? He's probably the only guy in America that can make everybody, including the 12th man, better, right?
Yeah.
So I've got Duke going to the Final Four, but I'll get to that pick here in a little bit.
Okay.
As far as that next game in the 8-9 matchup with Baylor and Mississippi State, Mississippi State's a team that hasn't made the tournament too frequently over the last couple decades. Don't have a win actually in 17 years. Baylor, I just think that they have too much strength and star power on top of that for Mississippi State. You're looking at, VJ Edgecombe, who's likely a top 5 to 7 pick this year. And, if they need any offense late, you better believe that's where the ball's going. But besides that, they've got, 4 guys in double digit scoring. So they can, be one of those teams that if they get hot, look out.
Awesome. Oregon Liberty.
This is an interesting matchup. Oregon had the easiest, in my opinion, Big Ten schedule of anybody this year. And I say that because they played 5 teams in the tournament from the Big Ten only once. So, you know, they didn't do anything exceptionally well. There was nothing to say like, this is, you know, why I would put a mark against Oregon. But they'll win games, right? Dana Altman just gets things done. He was that guy at Creighton in the past. You know, it's just a persona at a certain point. And I think that they do get by Liberty. Although what I'll say about Liberty is that's one of the best three-point shooting teams in the nation. You know, they've won their conference 6 of the last 7 years. So, you know, I do think that's going to be, you know, a top 5 to 6 game to watch in the tournament.
Hey, do you ever weigh in though? Like that game's out in Seattle. I mean, that's a big advantage for Oregon over Liberty coming from across the country to go play. That no fans probably get, not many fans will travel there. Oregon's been to Seattle many, many times, you know, because of being in conference. They're not in the Big Ten, you know, Big Ten, but you know, when they were in the Pac-12 and all that.
And that's an excellent point. Yeah, I certainly do. You know, especially if it's a early game on the East Coast. For instance, say Oregon is playing in Raleigh, okay? And
Right.
they've got an 11:15 a.m. kickoff the tournament, the game. Then it's going to be a little bit of an impact, right? You got to think that's 8:15 for those guys in the morning. So that I'll dock them a few points for a situation like that. But I wouldn't say across the board. It's more the anomalies than anything else in those situations.
Arizona, Akron.
Arizona is one of the more difficult to figure out teams in this whole tournament. You know, they started the year off 3-4, finished it 3-5. Really good middle portion of the season to get them to where they were. But I have a hard time trusting this this Arizona team to make, you know, quite a run. And so that's why I like Akron that game. You know, Gross.
I'm an Akron Zip, just so you know. I have a degree from Akron.
Nice. John Gross is a guy that, you know, has the experience. You know, he's got the U of I background, Ed. With that said and done, they shoot the 3 ball at a phenomenal mark. They are one of the smallest teams in, you know, the tournament, but I think that those guys might throw up 30 to 34 threes. And, you know, if they hit 12 to 14, I think that gets it done. So yeah. I like the 13 seed in that one.
Bombs away Akron.
There you go. We created a new nickname for him.
BYU VCU.
That's thrilling, that matchup. I mean, VCU has done so much in the tournament. You know, I'm a Butler guy, as you can see there, and it's been tough the last you know,
well,
7
quite the
years.
run though.
Yeah. But with that being said, you know, we got VCU in the Final Four, you know, during one of those tournament runs, but they've really kept that steady line of, you know, making the tournament, winning a game or two. But, you know, I'd say this, BYU is arguably the best shooting team of all in the tournament. And that encompasses both inside the arc and outside, 55+% from 2-point range and, you know, high 30s from deep. So I think it's just so hard to, you know, pick against those kind of squads. So I like BYU in that one. And I think that they make a run actually to the Elite Eight.
Wisconsin,
that next one's pretty interesting to me too.
Yeah.
You know, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, fellas, about picking those teams that make the long, you know, runs within their conference tournament. That was Wisconsin, right?
Yeah.
I'll say this about them, though. It's not your typical Badgers team. You know, they're putting up 80 points and they can win a game that way this year. You know, I'm so used to those 55 to 49 confident wins, right? But Montana's got some firepower. They have an offensive efficiency rating that's like 125. For perspective, it is greater than the Cleveland Cavaliers. Yeah. So if these guys, you know, play with that kind of tempo, it's going to be a tough test for anybody, you know, let alone Wisconsin. So I think that Montana walks away victorious in that one.
Oof. All right. St. Mary's Vanderbilt.
That's a program that is due for a nice run. St. Mary's in the tournament. Randy Bennett's been there for 24 years. He's made one Sweet 16 that was dating back to I believe 2010. And they won their conference. Good year overall in the conference. Some will say it was down for Gonzaga, but I go back to that number. They're still the number 8 net team in America, right?
Right.
Even though they got an 8 seed. And so I think, Vanderbilt, we were talking about earlier, being beneficiaries of playing in a conference where you have that many matchups against quad 1 teams. They fit into that bucket, right? And so I think St. Mary's wins that game fairly handily. And I like them to actually get by Bama in the next round, who I think
Wow.
Yeah. Bama's got a little bit of injury trouble here. It's a similar squad than what we've seen over the last couple of years. They, Nelson, one of their star guards, and Mark Sears have stuck around, but Nelson's questionable for that game, and I just think it'll be tough for them to compete on that number 2 seed level if he doesn't suit up.
Yeah, that will be tough because I like Alabama a lot during this regular season, but they're nicked up right now, so we'll have to see how that goes.
Houston.
And not to short count, Robert Morris. That's a team that won the Horizon. They look good in the tournament, but it just goes back to the 15 beating the 2 only so often. Yeah.
How good is Houston?
Gosh, I love Houston. I think that's a team that, whether you're on board with Kelvin Sampson or not, he has really turned a program around, and made it his own. And that culture means a lot, right? Especially at a school like that. I think that I saw Houston play Butler at the beginning of the season, a game that I'll not forget in the tournament. And, Butler was coming into it, I think, one loss, was, on the verge of being ranked and just got torched, from the tip off, 20+ point loss. And, you just, on all dimensions, Houston was sound. I think that those guys are going to be a team that, if you're in a office bracket, a large pool, given there will be a lot of Duke picks, a bunch of Auburn ones, Florida as well. Don't sleep on picking Houston to win the national championship.
Yeah, Kelvin's got them built for this tournament. They'll be gritty in this tournament for sure. They'll be a hard out for anybody.
And how do the 2 G's match up? Gonzaga versus Georgia from the SEC.
That's one of those that I think a lot of people will pick Gonzaga to even beat Houston because, you just see who's a recognizable name. So that's kind of where I was going on that point earlier, is that if you're in that larger bracket, you have to have a few, competitive advantage picks, as I'll call them, right? So that's, one where I do like Gonzaga to get by Georgia. All goes back to, how strongly I felt about Gonzaga that I've, mentioned on this show. But, Georgia can get hot at any time, too. I mean, that's a team that pulled off 4 straight late in the season in the SEC. So, they're certainly in a situation where if they're clicking and they win that game, Houston's a tough out, right? But if they somehow find a way beyond them, they could make a run. We all know Clemson from last year, and I think that was a phenomenal story, being such a football school, right, Ed?
Yeah, there.
And they're coming off that Elite 8. They've got a couple guys that have been more impact players this year. They did lose a few to the draft, and they've stepped up in big ways. And so I think that experience will be just enough to get by. Miami State, they certainly did well in Southland, had the best offensive efficiency numbers, and defensively, they forced turnovers at a high rate, but it's just not gonna be parallel with playing that kind of competition, I don't think.
Is that enough to take him past, I assume, Purdue, the winner of the Purdue High Point?
Rob, I have a lot of trouble with Purdue in NCAA tournaments. I gotta say, I mean, you're looking at a team that can make a national championship game or bust to anybody in the first round. I think that this year they're a little more dynamic than most Purdue teams we've seen as far as having a 1-2 scoring punch. They have Braden Smith, who was the Big Ten Player of the Year, and then Trey Kaufman, Ren, that I think put up about 19 plus, right? So they'll be leaned on heavily. And to answer that question, I think Purdue does get by Clemson this year.
Interesting.
We'll see what happens tonight in the Texas Xavier game. I personally think that Xavier, finds a way to get that one done. They've just historically done so well in the tournament, right? And
Yes.
it's a program that's built for March. So I do like Xavier, but I'm high on Illinois. I think that, ultimately they're getting healthy at the right time. They've got a top 40, offense, top 15 defense. They've got a lottery pick, another first rounder. They've got the kind of squad that Brad Underwood has built to make a deep run in the tournament. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. The Big Ten, I think, is going to, have a very successful March. So I like Illinois to get by whoever wins that game, tonight, and actually beat Kentucky in making a Sweet 16 appearance. Kentucky, I think kind of falls on the back of Kobe Bray and three-point shooting. If he can get lights out, he's one of the best shooters in America, about a 43% clip from behind the arc. Then don't get me wrong, they can run away with the game. But
Right.
I think that you're looking at a team that's been hurt for a lot of the season too in Kentucky. It'll be an interesting matchup between those two, and probably one of the best round of 32 matchups if it holds true between Illinois and Kentucky.
Well, earlier in the season, we played the clip of Coach's meltdown for UCLA after they played Michigan about how we're not tough. He laid into him. And since then, it's hard to argue with the results for UCLA.
Absolutely. Let me say one thing. If you haven't watched the clip on Omaha basketball, I didn't get a chance to talk about them much over there, and the garbage cans. It is a Google search. Omaha garbage cans. Real quick, they started the year off 4-9, and their coach in the locker room was just fed up. Right? He hits a garbage can, and the team gets riled up. He ends that speech post game saying that, speaking to the garbage can, if you're still here next game, I'm going to beat the living shit out of you. And so they made it a tradition. Every game, they beat a garbage can in the locker room. And so they even had a celebration after making the dance. It turned their season around, the garbage can. So,
can't wait to check that out. So UCLA, Tennessee, is that what you see on that coming out
I
of
see
there?
Utah State actually over there.
Do you?
Their third consecutive appearance in the tournament. It was a 26-win team. It's interesting there too. They've lost a lot of guys to the portal, and that's something that I don't think we talk enough about. And,
Right.
so you have to hand it to a program like that just keeps rebuilding. But on the other side of that, I think with a tournament win, this year, that's an organization that can start to really bring in portal guys from the low to, mid-major programs. Like, they've got that case. We're building something here long-term that we can get you that national stage attention on a more regular basis, right? By being in the tournament 3 straight years. So I like that matchup, against Tennessee. That's an elite defense, an inconsistent offense, as you guys know, I'm sure. I mean, they had a 30-point spread against Florida, and then they lost by 20 as well. So you never know what you're going to get out of the Tennessee offense, right? Which is why I like Utah State going 2 rounds. You know, and that does make it a little easier to pick Illinois to make the Elite Eight too, against Houston.
Gotcha. So who do you have? You have Michigan State, you have Maryland, you have Houston, you have Duke.
Yep. So I've got the Michigan State Houston matchup on the left side of the bracket. You know, on that right, I like Duke to get by BYU in the Elite Eight. And then, you know, Houston to knock off Illinois. So we're looking at a number 2 seed, Michigan State in the Final Four, up against a number 4 Maryland team. You've got your Duke top 2 seed overall, you know, in there, as well as Houston. That's what I said earlier. Don't be afraid to take Houston. I like Houston to make the national championship game. Like Ed said, you know, they're built for it. You know, against Michigan State, arguably as hot of a team as anybody. It's the Coach Izzo situation as well. You know, that certainly adds value. With that said and done, the Big Ten hasn't won a national championship in 25 years. We're dating back to, you know, the Jason Richardson days, right? His son's on the team now. I don't think they're going to win one for at least 26. I like Houston to win the national championship this year.
Rob, unbelievable call, unbelievable discussion. Now I'm very concerned about my bracket, so I might have to make some tweaks to it. And look, you ever make your way out to Lake Lure, please let me know. I'd love to get a round or 2 in with you over at one of these fine courses out here.
I certainly will, Rob. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and thank you both for your time.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate your insight.
Take care.
Okay, stay well, sir.
Thanks. See ya.
Okay. Ed, congratulations on your promotion to the offensive coordinator to the Rhine Fire. And look forward to seeing how that season progresses and adding coverage of the Elf League to our podcast.
All right. Well, I'll be around next Wednesday, so hopefully we'll get together then, and then I'll head over.
All right. Sounds good, brother.
Okay. You be good. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.